Hello everyone, I'm Harvey from blueshiftcoding.com. Here at Blueshift, we love delivering our coding clubs, camps, and even online classes, and we're even more excited today to have you on board with our very first live hackathon. So a hackathon is a challenge, and it's usually over a few days, and we're going to be coding and sharing our ideas over the next week. And the challenge that we propose to you today is to create a multiplayer game using Scratch, and that's going to be a multiplayer game that you can play at home and share with friends online. And you can submit your projects and your ideas to us throughout the week, along with any questions that you might have. And you can tune in next Tuesday at 3 o'clock as well, where I'll announce the winners of those projects, as well as go over any questions and share our ideas that we've had over the past week. So we've got two prizes available. We've got two prizes of £100 towards our online classes, and that's for age group 9 and under and age group 10 and over. So more details about the competition after this session today. So let's go straight into an example of my mini game that I've created. So let's take a look at Scratch here. So my example that I'm going to go through today is Pong. So let's just show a quick demo. So there we go. There's a quick demo of what we are trying to achieve today. So let's take a quick look at starting a new Scratch project to create this multiplayer game that hopefully gives you a few tips and a few tricks on creating some games of your own. So I'm going to create a new Scratch project. So hopefully you have your Scratch accounts and you can get logged in and you can start your projects, and feel free to code along. But don't worry if you don't want to code along. We're going to record this video as well, so you can rewind and go back over any aspects of today that you might have missed. So here we go, let's get started. The first thing that I'm going to do is I'm just going to quickly name my project, and I'm going to call this Pong. And I'm going to call it Pong HJ, just so we know that when I submit my idea, that my name's going to be there, my initial's going to be there, just to make things a little bit easier. So let's get started. If we're trying to make a Pong game, like you saw in the example earlier, we're going to need 2 players, we're going to need a ball, we're going to need 2 goals, and we're going to need 2 scores at the top. So we don't need this cat in our new Scratch project, so let's get rid of the Scratch cat. And I'm going to go straight into creating a backdrop. So I'm going to click backdrops over here at the stage side of the screen. And then I'm going to click backdrops up here as well, so I can edit that backdrop. And this plain white background, this is what I'm going to change to make things a little bit more interesting. So I'm just going to make things simple. I'm going to put a rectangle in the middle, and I'm going to change the color to have a little bit of a turquoise. I think that looks quite nice, so there we go. So now we're going to be able to see our sprites a little bit easier because we have this backdrop now. So let's go back to our example. We need 2 players. We're going to need 2 players to start our multiplayer game. So let's create a sprite, and instead of choosing a sprite, I'm going to create my own and click Paint. There we go, and I'm going to keep things simple, and I'm just going to make white rectangles. So I'm going to take the saturation all the way down, and just pop a white rectangle and center it in the middle. We don't need an outline. We can get rid of that there. Perfect. So there is my player. Now it looks a little bit too big on the stage. So what I might do is change the size of it to something, let's try 50, see how that looks. That looks like a good size. So there is our first player. I'm going to call this player A, just to keep things named and nice and easy to refer to. And I'm going to make the x-coordinate -200. There we go. Okay, so we can start coding our player. But before we do that, I'm just going to show you how to quickly duplicate the costumes, and this will come in handy later on. But I'm going to make the player again, but now you can see that the second costume is a little bit smaller, and that's going to come in handy later on if we want to make the game more difficult for ourselves. So we can toggle between these costumes, and however difficult we want the game to be, we can change the sizes here. But I'm going to stick with costume 1 for now, and let's add some code. Okay. So the very first thing we're going to need to do is we're going to need to start our code, and that's going to be with an event block. And I'm going to use the event when green flag is clicked. So when you click the green flag at the top, all the code that follows this is going to run. And I'm now quickly going to make a variable as well called game over. Now what this is going to do is tell us whether the game is running or the game has finished. So when game over equals 0, the game is it's not over and the game's going to run. So when we start our game with a repeat loop, this is going to repeat while game over equals 0, and then if game over equals 1, then it's going to end the game and it's going to stop the loop. So let's just recap on that quickly. We're going to set game over to 0 when we start, and then we're going to repeat all our code until game over equals 1. So when the game finishes, we're going to stop this. So what do we need for our player to move? It's going to stay where it is, apart from when we press the up and down arrows, it's going to move up and down. So instead of dragging it up and down the screen like I've done here, let's use some code to do that. So I'm going to grab an if block. I'm going to grab when key pressed, and I'm going to change this to the W key. So I'm going to use W for my up key for player A. What I'm going to do with the W is change Y by 10. So let's just give this a quick go. So when I press the green flag, if I press W, the player moves up. And that's exactly what I wanted to happen. And now let's do the same thing again. And instead of W, we'll use the S key to change Y by -10. And what that's going to do is it's going to move the player down. So if I press W, it goes up. If I press S, it's going to go down. And now I've got my player A, and player A is able to move up and down the screen. Now, for me, I think that's too slow, so I'm going to change Y to 15 and -15, just to make it a little bit quicker. There we go. Now we can move up and down the screen quite quickly. So, brilliant. We've got player A sorted. Now it's easy to copy player A and duplicate that. So you can right-click this sprite here, or if you're on a Mac, you can press Command and click, and that's going to give you the option to duplicate. There you go. So then you can change the name to player B. And to make them symmetrical, I'm going to make player A at -200 and player B at +200. There we go. And when I run this code now, when I press W and S, player A and B move up at the same time. So I also need to change the code in player B to be up arrow and down arrow. So that means now that two players can play at the same time, and W and S can move player A, and the up and down arrow can move player B. So there we go, we've got our two players. Now let's have a look at what else we need in our Pong game. So we also have two goals either side, as well as the ball. So let's make the two goals first, because that's quite simple. We'll create a new sprite, we'll paint our own. And it's going to be quite similar to creating the players. I'm just going to create a huge rectangle. I'm going to center it, and I'm going to change the color. So this is going to be a different color for each player. So maybe a kind of a bluish color for A. I like that one, and we can drag that over to the left-hand side. And if we need to make that a little bit bigger because it doesn't quite fill the screen, then let's make that size 120, let's say. And the position, well, let's move that as far left as possible. So we can make that minus 240 in the X position. And let's call that goal A. And it's as simple as that. What we can do now is just duplicate again for goal B. Make them symmetrical, so goal A was at minus 240, so goal B can be at positive 240. There we are. I'm also going to change the colour of B just to distinguish the two players, and maybe we make this one red. There we go. So now we've got two goals and two players that move up and down. It's as easy as that so far. Let's have another look. So now we've got the ball left to do. Now the ball is where we're going to have the majority of our code. So this is where you might need to pay a little bit more attention and maybe concentrate a little bit more. So let's create a new sprite. I've called that ball. And in costume 1, I'm going to do something as simple as make a circle. And let's make it white. Okay, great. Now you can have the ball that big if you wish. But for my game, that's a little bit too small. Too big. So I'm going to make it smaller. And let's say it's about 20% of its original size. So I'll put size 20 there. So there we go. There's our ball sprite. Now we're going to need to make our ball move around the screen. So let's go to our code. We're going to need to grab a green flag to start the code. But then we're also going to create a few more variables that will help us out later in the code. So I'm going to create a variable called score A, and that's going to keep track of the score for player A. I'm going to do the same thing for player B. There we go. And what I'm going to do is set those scores at the very beginning to B. To 0, for A to 0 and for score B to 0. So now when we start the game, the players can start from scratch and the scores are 0. And again, we're going to use the same principle as earlier for player A for this loop, repeat until game over equals 1. So let's do that again. Oh, my mistake. Let's get repeat until, there we go. So repeat until game over equals 1. So as we said before, we're going to set game over to 0 to begin with. So that means our game is going to continuously run through the code until the game over changes. So for the moment, the code is going to keep repeating whatever is inside of here. And what we'll do for the ball to bounce around the screen is we'll simply move 10 steps. And let's see what happens here. So the ball moves. Move 10 steps is going to mean that the ball is going to continuously move 10 steps. And if I drag the ball over here, it's going to keep trying to move. That's not very interesting at the moment. It just stays stuck to the wall. So we'll also include if on edge bounce. Now the ball can bounce around. And again, that's not very interesting. It's just bouncing side to side. So let's start the ball by pointing in a different direction. So I'm going to put pointing direction here. And we can change this, have a play around. Let's say it starts by pointing at 45 degrees, or maybe 120, or something like that. But what we actually want is a random number here. So it points in a different direction every time. So it's fair to both players when it starts. And what I can do here is start from 0 to 360. And because there are 360 degrees in a circle, that's going to point in a random direction every time. I also want the ball to start in the middle every time. So I can use a goto before the loop, so right at the start. And I can set this to 0, 0, so it starts right in the middle of our page. So let's give that a go. Let's click the green flag now. Every time we click the green flag, the ball starts from the middle and bounces around the screen. Great, so that's our game mechanic for the ball bouncing. But now there are two problems. When it hits a goal, it doesn't score. And when it hits a player, it doesn't bounce off the player. And there are two crucial elements of our game going forward. So let's stop that. So what we need in this loop now is we need to ask the question, is the ball hitting the player? So we'll do that via an if statement, and we'll pop an if statement in this loop. And we can ask the question, is the ball touching player A? So let's start with player A. If ball is touching player A, then we'll put our code here. So what do we want to do when we hit player A? Well, we don't want to do much other than we want to now point in that direction towards the other goal. So I'm going to say point in direction, and again I'm going to pick a random number, but this time if we look at the direction, anything on this side is from 0 degrees to 180 degrees. So if we pick a number between 0 and 180, then it is going to bounce back in that direction. But actually what I'm going to do is I'm going to limit it to 30 degrees to 150. So it's in a range that looks something like this. And that's so it's not too shallow, because if it's too shallow, the ball's just going to bounce up and down constantly, and that might make things a little bit boring. So let's keep that to 30 degrees to 150. And let's see what happens when it hits player A now. There we go. So every time it hits player A, it's going to bounce in a random direction towards the other side of the screen. And we can do something very, very similar. So we can duplicate that for player B. But this time, instead of between positive 30 and positive 150 degrees, we'll go between negative 30 and negative 150 degrees, because the negative sign means it's going to bounce in the opposite direction. So here we go. We have our two players now, and they're able to bounce the ball across the screen. But again, it's still not very interesting because you can't score any points just yet. So what's next? Well, we can do something very similar to what we've done with the players, but we can add an if block this time. But instead of asking if we've hit player A or B, we can ask if we've hit goal A or goal B. And that's why we created these sprites earlier. So now we can have if touching goal A. We can change the score by 1. So if goal A is hit, it's actually player B who has scored the goal. So if touching goal A, change score B. And I can do the same thing with goal B to change score A. There we go. So if we start over again, you can see that every time that the goal is hit, the scores are changing. But actually, that's not helping us out very well because we need to reset the ball to the middle every time a goal happens. So we've got the code as it stands. And I'm also going to add a broadcasted message. I'm going to say new message, and this is going to say score. So every time something happens here, so every time a goal happens, or every time a point is scored, we're going to broadcast the message score. So what that's going to do is it's just going to trigger some other code that I'll code in just a moment. So let's pop those in there. So score happens if it touches goal A or goal B. And then what I can do is when that triggers score, I can have when I receive score, the code is going to happen here now. So when broadcast score, this code is going to run. So what I want to do here every time a point is scored is start the ball from the middle again. So go to 0, 0, like we had at the start. And also, let's point in a random direction to start with again. So exactly like we started the game, from 0 to 360. Every time a point is scored, the ball is going to start in the middle again. And to make things a little bit friendlier for the players playing the game, I'm going to wait 1 second, just to here after we've broadcasted score, and just to here after we've broadcasted score again. Just so it gives the players a little bit of time to prepare in between goals. There we go. Okay, so that is the majority of our code finished. But at the moment, this game can go on forever. There's no way of winning at the moment. So what we want to do is add a new sprite. And again, I'm going to paint my own down here. I'm going to call this sprite win. And the first costume is going to say winner. And I like the font Pixel. So there we go. And I'm going to do some arrows saying that A is the winner. There we go. So as you can see on the screen, I have a big winner sign now. I'm going to center that to 0, 0. And I'm going to duplicate the costume to have one variation that is winner A, and then duplicate that and have winner B as well. So I'm going to change the costume names just so it's easier for me to refer to later on. But here the arrows point to A, and in winner B, I'm going to have the arrows point to B. So I'm going to just flip the arrows, there we go. So there are two different costumes there, one for winner A and one for winner B. So let's code what's going to happen to the game. There we go. So let's get started again with the green flag. Let's also get one of our loops. So repeat until, and again, repeat until game over equals 1. So that's from the variables. And what we're going to do is, we don't actually want to show this winner sign until the game is over. So actually, I'm going to hide this for now. So while the game is going on, while this game loop is running, winner is actually going to disappear. And it's not until afterwards that we're going to show the winner sprite. Okay. So we need to now ask the question of, is the score greater than, let's say 5. I'm going to set the limit of my game to 5. So if I ask if, and I'm going to have equals to 5, and that is going to be if the score of A is equal to 5, set game over to 1. The game's over, and all these loops are now going to stop. So when we had here, repeat until game over is 1, so the players are going to still be able to move, the ball is still going to be able to move, until this game over 1 is changed. So if score equals 5, then the game is now finished. Let's duplicate that for score B as well. So if score B is 5, we'll also do the same thing. But the reason that we've used two if statements there are because if A wins, I'm going to switch to costume A, so winner A. And if B wins, I'm going to switch to costume B. So let's test this out. So as you can see up here, score B is now 2. And I'm going to play this game until score B is 5 to see what happens. There we go. So player B has scored 5 goals, so player B is now the winner. So our game works, and we can have a winner. So you can stop there if you like, or we can try and make our game even cooler by making things animated or add sounds and things like that. So a couple of ideas that come to mind for me are adding sounds when the ball bounces on the players, and maybe adding some music in the background. So let's maybe add some music in the background first. Now we can include some code here in this when the green flag clicked, but to make things easier to see, I'm just going to grab another one, and both of these will run at the same time. I'm also going to grab another repeat loop, and I'm also going to make it the same as before. So repeat this until game is over. And what I'm going to do here is I'm just going to add some sounds in the background. So you can go to sounds at the top, choose new sound. And so if you're trying to put songs in the background, loops are usually a good shout and good ones to use. So you can listen to a few of these jingles, but the one that I'm going to select is video game down here. Video game down here is the one I'm going to select. And it's a little bit loud at the moment. So I'm going to click softer until it's at an appropriate volume. And it's not going to deafen everyone. So here we go. Let's go to sounds. And we'll play video game 1 until done. And that's just going to keep repeating. So video game sound is going to keep repeating until the game's over. Here we go. Let's test that out again. There we go. And you can put any sound in there that you like. And it's going to stop when the game's finished. And just because it's inside this loop. And what we can do as well is just to be certain that the sound stops when the game finishes, just put stop all sounds at the end of here. And also we can add a new sound when there's a winner. We can search for cheer. And we can actually play sound cheer when someone wins. So either player, whether it's A or B, we can cheer for them when they win. I think that's a nice little feature there. Okay, let's add some more sounds. Let's go back to the ball. So the ball is where our code was touching player A, touching player B, or touching either of the goals. So we can add some sounds now if we bounce off the players A or B. Now I quite like the trombone sound, so I'm going to select the trombone, and I also quite like this robot effect. You can click the robot here, and it changes the sound a little bit, so it sounds a bit funkier. So let's go. So now I've got the sound, play trombone, or start trombone. I'm going to use start trombone, and when it says touching player A, I'm just going to insert start trombone there, and touching player B, start trombone there. And that just means when it hits A or B, the trombone sound's going to play. So now I have some bounce sounds as well. And that's still a little bit loud, so I can go back to trombone in sounds and just make it a little bit softer. There we go. Let's test that again. There we go. I also think there should be a sound when someone scored, just to make it a little bit more interesting, and so you know when someone actually has scored. So let's pick a new sound. Maybe a trumpet this time. Let's use a trumpet instead of a trombone. And again, I like the robot sound. So let's use that there. So let's go back to the code. And anytime I receive score, so when someone scores, we can start the trumpet. Let's try that one out. There we go. So all our sounds work. And again, we could stop there, or we could keep going. So if you're happy with that, then you could stop there. But let's keep going. So what happens if the two players playing the game are really good and they're just going to keep playing forever and ever? Well, you could go back to the costumes that we made for both the players earlier, and you could select these. But now actually, let's add some code that the game increases in difficulty the further you go in the game. So actually, I'm going to go back to the ball sprite. I'm going to go all the way back to the top, and I'm actually going to add a new variable. So I'm going to add a new variable, and I'm going to call it bounces. And what this is it's the number of bounces between the two players. And so how long the rally is between the two players. So if no points have been scored, bounces is going to keep increasing. Now we'll set bounces to 0 to begin with. But every time it hits player A or hits player B, we're going to change bounces by 1. So what this is saying is every time a player hits the ball, it's going to count the number of bounces. But when we score, so here's our code for when we score, we're going to set bounces back to 0 again, because that means the rally's ended. We're going to set the score to 0. So we've made our variable for bounces. Now let's implement it and use it. So if we go back into player A, bounces is still available as a variable. So what we're going to do is just create a quick loop. Again, same as before, green flag clicked. Repeat until game over equals 1. And we're going to ask the question if bounces is greater than some number. So basically we want something to change when the rally is over a certain amount. So I'm going to pick 10. So let's say the players are playing and they've not scored in 10 bounces. So we're going to make it more difficult after 10 bounces. And that's what this is asking here. If bounces, is less than 10 here, let's duplicate that. We can make if bounces is greater than 10 here. And what we can do to make things more difficult is switch to costume 2. So remember before, costume 2 was actually smaller. So if it's less than 10 bounces, we can switch to costume 1. And if it's more than 10 bounces, we can switch to costume 2. And we can do that for player B as well. And all we need to do to duplicate is drag this and drop it in player B. So now player A has the code as we've just shown. And then player B also has that code now duplicated. And we can do the same thing, costume 1, costume 2. I'm actually going to add a third one because we've got 3 costumes. So if the bounces are bigger than 20, we can go to costume 3. And I can do that in A as well. Let's duplicate that. If bounces are more than 20, switch to costume 3. So it's going to get progressively more difficult if you keep scoring without, if you keep hitting the ball without scoring. So let's just give that a quick test. Oh, I failed already. There we go. So 1 bounce, 2 bounce, 3 bounces, 4 bounces, 5 bounces, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So after this, the costumes should change. There we go. Now it's more difficult. 12, 13, 14, 15, 19, 20, 21. There we go. So after 20 bounces, it changes the costume again to make it more difficult. So now we know that works. So the game gets progressively more difficult when you have longer rallies. So let's make the scores more visible and let's get these other variables out of the screen to make things just look a bit nicer when we're playing the game. So we don't need bounces on the screen, so we can just check this box here, and all that's going to do is bounces still exists, but it's not going to show it to the screen. And we can do the same with game over. And we can move these scores around. And actually, if you right click, you can make them larger, and it just makes things look a bit nicer and a bit neater. There we go. So we've got 1 and 0. When we start the game again, everything goes back to normal. Score is 0. And the costumes are the right size. So there we have it. So there's some tips for creating your game. Now you can add all sorts of details. You don't have to just follow what I've done today. You can even add some effects as well. So if you wanted to add effects to the goal, you can go to things like change ghost effect is a good one, and that's just going to make it a little bit more subtle on the screen. And you can do things like that. We can do the same to goal B. And everything beyond this now is more just about style and about aesthetics and how the thing looks when we play the game. So we've added our sounds, we've added our gameplay, and we can now have a winner and make the game more difficult. So there's lots of things going on there. But that's it for today. So if you have missed anything, this video, like I said, will be recorded. So you can come back and have a look at any of the code that we've shared today. And I'll also share the project, Scratch project in the description below. Now, let's move on to submitting your projects. You can see that I have share at the top of the screen here. You'll need to click share, and that will make the project available for other people to see. And it'll say, congratulations on sharing your project. And what you need to do now is either copy this URL at the top of your browser, or to make things easier, Scratch has a big button down here that says copy link. If you click copy link, this window will pop up, and you can click copy link again. And now that link is copied. And we'll have in the description a link to where you can submit your projects, as well as you can post them on social media. So, thanks for tuning in. There will be more details about how to submit in the description below. But just to run over a few more things again, the criteria for these projects are going to be judged on 3 different things. So it's going to be the gameplay code, how well does it work, are there any bugs in the code, does it play well? The second category is going to be about style and creativity, and does it look cool, does it feel cool, and is the overall design well made? And the final thing is how well does it fit to our brief of it being a multiplayer game? So it could be a 2-player versus game like today that you've seen in Pong, or it could be a 2-player co-op game, or it could even be a 1-player game where there's a high score or something involved where different people can challenge that high score, and you can share this between friends, family, especially when everyone's at home. It'd be something interesting to play with everybody else. So you can submit your games by 9 AM next Tuesday, British summertime next Tuesday, and the winners will be announced live at 3 o'clock, also on Tuesday, the same day, next Tuesday, the 14th of April. Now, if you've missed anything today, this video will be recorded, and also you can submit your projects via social media, so we can use @BlueShiftCoding or hashtag code with BlueShift if you're using Twitter or Facebook. But also there's a link in the description for submitting your ideas. There's also more information in the description about how to submit, any help questions you might need answering via a frequently asked questions page. Our website should be down there as well, and the code from today's demonstration. And if you'd like to sign up to our newsletter, that will also be in the description below, and you can get some more information on our other events and things coming up in the future regarding our online classrooms and things like that. So I'm really looking forward to seeing your ideas, and good luck to everyone, and thanks for watching, and I'll see you next Tuesday. Take care.